It began on an ordinary spring afternoon in Washington. No gunfire, no chase, no alleyway rendezvous. Just a single man walking across the polished floor of the Soviet embassy as if he were entering a neighborhood grocery store. He carried an envelope in one hand and conviction in the other. Inside that envelope were 3 items that would alter the course of American intelligence forever. 2 names of Soviet officers secretly helping the United States. A page from the CIA personnel directory with his own position circled, and a request for $50,000. That quiet walk through hostile territory signaled the beginning of one of the greatest disasters in CIA history. Within weeks, Soviet agents working for the United States began to vanish. Some stopped communicating. Some were arrested. Some were tortured. Some were executed with a bullet to the head. Operations that took years to build collapsed in days. The man who delivered that envelope was Aldrich Hazen Ames, and his betrayal would become one of the most devastating acts of treason ever committed by an American intelligence officer. To understand how one man unraveled so much, we must go back to where the rot began. And the truth, as my father wrote in his diary before dementia took him away, is far more unsettling than the official story. Betrayals that destroy nations rarely begin with ideology. They begin with desire. Aldrich Ames had plenty of that. My name is Michael Graves, though in the world I grew up around, names were never the whole story. My father worked inside American intelligence for 25 years. He walked through rooms without windows, sat in meetings that never appeared on official schedules, and carried secrets that weighed heavier than anything he ever told our family. Before dementia began stealing him piece by piece, before faces and memories slipped into fog, he gave me something he said must never be lost. A leather-bound diary with worn edges, a cracked spine, and pages filled with shaky handwriting that grew more fragmented as the disease spread. Inside that diary were warning stories of men who rose through the ranks of American intelligence, only to sell it all for money, ideology, or ego. Stories of double agents who smiled at colleagues while delivering their names to Moscow. Files about operations that failed because someone inside the house was rotting from the inside out. One name appeared more than any other. One name circled, underlined, annotated in the margins. One man my father said did more damage to the CIA than most hostile intelligence services managed in decades. That name was Aldrich Hazen Ames. And what you are about to hear is not simply a recounting of events. It is a reconstruction of the story from the pieces my father left behind. A story of greed, betrayal, corruption, and the lives that were sacrificed for a man's luxury and a woman's appetite. A story my father wrote with more fear than anger, because a traitor inside is more dangerous than 1,000 enemies outside. Before we open that file, if you care about preserving these hidden stories, if you believe truth deserves to be told, even when it's uncomfortable, please subscribe and like this video. You help this channel grow, and you ensure that these forgotten histories are not buried again. Now let us turn the page. Aldrich Ames did not grow up in chaos or poverty. He was the son of educators, a college lecturer father, and a high school English teacher mother. But his childhood changed forever when his father joined the CIA's Directorate of Operations. The family moved to Virginia, then Southeast Asia, living inside the quiet, orderly world of diplomats and intelligence officers. This was a life crafted from discipline and secrets, a life where dinner conversations were filtered, and children learned early what questions not to ask. Ames's father, brilliant but troubled, battled alcoholism that blunted his own career, sowing in his son a mix of ambition and insecurity that would later become volatile. Young Aldrich's entry into intelligence began almost by accident. A high school summer job at the CIA as a records analyst. A clerical return a few years later. The agency became a familiar place. A place where an awkward young man could reinvent himself. But there was something missing in him, some spark, some purpose, some sense of self-worth. He drifted through university, drawn to theater and the arts, failing classes he hardly attended. Yet every time he stumbled, the CIA pulled him back in. By the early 1960s, he quietly slid into full-time employment. And the truth is, no one noticed anything extraordinary about him. And that is the dangerous thing about Aldrich Ames. He was invisible not because he was clever, but because he was ordinary. Ordinary until the one force he could not resist entered his life: need. Ames married a fellow CIA trainee and found himself posted overseas in Turkey, where he managed to recruit a few contacts and infiltrate a Marxist-Leninist organization. On paper, this looked impressive. In reality, his supervisors described him as introverted, unfocused, and inconsistent. His drinking increased. His attention drifted. The assessment noted that he seemed indifferent toward his work and was better suited to analysis than field operations. For most officers, such an appraisal would sting. For Ames, it left a deep wound. He began to see himself as someone overlooked, someone undervalued by the very institution he wanted to impress. He flirted with the idea of leaving the agency, but he never did. Instead, he let resentment grow, quiet and unspoken. Every failure he experienced, every incomplete assignment, every criticism slowly became someone else's fault. And this is where the seeds of betrayal begin. Spies rarely wake up one morning and decide to sell out their country. Betrayal grows slowly, fed by disappointment and shaped by bitterness. Still, despite mediocre performance, the CIA kept promoting him. The bureaucracy moved him through positions in New York, Mexico, and Washington. Each job gave him more access, more visibility, more classified information. And as his access grew, so did his frustration, his drinking, and eventually the pull of a new influence that would turn frustration into treason. Her name was Rosario. In Mexico City, Ames met a woman who would alter the trajectory of his life. Her name was Rosario. She was vibrant, emotional, and intoxicating, everything he was not. And she loved wealth with a hunger that far exceeded what any CIA salary could ever provide. Their affair was reckless. Her lifestyle was overwhelming. Designer clothing, expensive restaurants, high-end living. Ames wanted to keep her, but every day the financial pressure grew heavier. On top of the affair came the collapse of his first marriage, divorce costs, and alimony. He was drowning in debt, and debt is one of the most common seeds of treason. My father wrote that in his diary. He had seen it too many times. Officers who did not betray their country out of ideology, but out of desperation. A mortgage payment, a failing marriage, a foreign lover, a craving for a lifestyle the government could never fund. Aldrich Ames found himself cornered by the life he built, and he looked for a way out. The easiest way was treason. On April 16, 1985, Ames stepped into the Soviet embassy in Washington and handed over the envelope that marked his first act of treason. Inside were the first names he sold, men whose identities were supposed to be guarded with the highest possible protection, men who trusted the CIA with their lives. Ames also included his CIA position and a simple request: $50,000. With that one delivery, the collapse began. Within weeks, assets vanished, messages went silent, arrests were made, executions followed. The intelligence community scrambled to explain the sudden implosion. Some blamed operational mistakes, some blamed technical failures. Almost no one dared to suspect a mole, and certainly not a CIA officer with mediocre performance reviews. But the Soviets learned something crucial that day. Ames was willing to sell out anyone. He was willing to provide the most sensitive information the CIA possessed, and he was willing to risk everything for money. This was the moment he crossed a line from which he could never return. Ames continued his betrayal with growing confidence. He began revealing the identities of top-level CIA and FBI sources operating inside the Soviet Union. He provided technical operations, communications procedures, access points, dead drop protocols, the strategies used to recruit and protect agents. He essentially handed the KGB the blueprint to dismantle American espionage from the inside. More than 30 assets were compromised. At least 10 men were executed. Others disappeared into prisons. Entire operations died in silence. The CIA was bewildered. They launched internal reviews. They blamed embassy bugs. They blamed new KGB counterintelligence methods. They blamed anything except the possibility of betrayal within their own ranks. This institutional blindness would keep Ames safe for nearly a decade, while he grew richer, while more assets died, while the KGB tightened their grip. 1985 became known as the Year of the Spy. My father wrote that in his diary. It was the year when multiple American spies were exposed. Names were traded for money. Files were leaked. Lives were destroyed. The CIA finally began to suspect a mole. They launched investigations. They questioned former officers. They inspected technical systems. They even blamed a dismissed officer named Edward Lee Howard. But Howard was not responsible for the scale of the devastation. Aldrich Ames was. He remained invisible in the chaos he helped create. He fed his KGB handlers information while the CIA chased ghosts. He bought a luxury home, paid in cash. He drove a Jaguar. He remodeled his house. He gave his wife a lifestyle she flaunted openly, a level of spending that no CIA officer could ever justify. Yet somehow, for years, no one demanded answers. By 1993, the inconsistencies became impossible to ignore. His colleagues noticed his sudden wealth, his wife's endless spending, his expensive suits, his home renovations, his shockingly high phone bills, his casual arrogance. The CIA and FBI finally launched a joint investigation. They tailed him, they tracked his car, they dug through his trash, they monitored his bank accounts, they studied his patterns. Piece by piece, the truth emerged. Ames had been the one responsible for the collapse of the CIA's Soviet operations. His betrayal was so severe that entire branches of American intelligence had to be rebuilt from the ground up. When investigators searched his home, they found classified material, evidence of meetings, notes linked directly to Russian intelligence services. The net had finally closed, and Ames sensed it. On February 21, 1994, outside his home in Arlington, Virginia, Aldrich Ames was surrounded by FBI agents. He had no escape route, no way to spin the evidence, no way to deny the trail he had left. He told the agents they had made a big mistake. They had not. When the news broke, the country was stunned. A senior CIA counterintelligence officer had betrayed everything he was sworn to protect. The scale of the damage was nearly unimaginable. At least 10 men were dead because of him. Dozens of operations compromised, millions of dollars wasted, and the CIA's credibility shattered. Ames pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His wife received 5 years. To this day, Ames remains incarcerated, spending the rest of his life inside the concrete walls of a federal penitentiary. Some believe he did not act alone, that another unknown mole may still exist inside American intelligence. Only time will tell. The story of Aldrich Ames is not simply a story of greed. It is a reminder of how fragile intelligence work can be. One man, one weakness, one desire, and entire networks collapse. My father wrote that the greatest danger to any intelligence service is not the foreign enemy. It is the traitor already inside. Ames knew the consequences. He knew the men whose names he delivered would be tortured and killed. He did it anyway, for money, for comfort, for a lifestyle he believed he deserved. He left behind a trail of wreckage, families torn apart, trusted allies executed, operations burned, reputations destroyed. His betrayal remains one of the darkest chapters in American espionage. When you hear stories like this, you begin to understand that the Cold War was not shaped only by governments or armies. It was shaped by individuals, Some who defended the truth, others who sold it. Aldrich Ames chose the path of betrayal, and the price was paid not by him, but by the men who believed in something greater. If you found this story powerful or worth preserving, please subscribe and like this video. You help this channel grow, and you help keep these hidden histories alive. And if you are proud of the country that continues to stand strong despite the treachery of men like Ames, write this in the comments. God bless America. God bless the American people. Thank you for listening.